she has been making fake replicas.
Committing forgery, essentially.
Welcome to Archaeology Books for Fun, digging books that aren't drier than dirt. I'm your host, Tristan Herenstein. With me, as always, is my co-host, Barbara Clark.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are doing the 4th episode of Relics, a Faye Longchamp Mystery by Mary Anna Evans. We've been enjoying the heck out of this book. Once again, we've read the original book some time ago, and this one's, it's heating up.
Literally.
Okay.
There was a fire, guys, if you haven't been following along.
So yeah, let's dive right in and get started on this one because we started to get some answers in this episode, but not all of them because we still have one to go. Last time, Faye was angling to she got access to some of the places she wanted to dig, and she'd made friends with kind of an eccentric lady called Amanda Lynn, and Amanda Lynn invited her over to dinner, and the teenager Jimmy was going to be there, who Faye has encountered but never had a conversation with.
Right, yeah.
And so she was kind of looking forward to getting to know Amanda Lynn a little more, because Amanda Lynn, what makes her eccentric is that her husband passed some time ago, but she still talks to him and about him like he's there, but also knows that he's passed.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, maybe coping mechanism or just some way to keep him in her memory. I don't really know, but it's endearing but weird.
Yeah.
And
just so long as it's not a harmful kind of a situation, and we can't tell that from this.
And her kid Jimmy, teenager, this is a small town. He's the kid that's gonna make it out. He's like the little
kind of the football star, basically.
Yeah, the little town's football hero, gonna
Not
go to college.
But that sort of trope.
Yeah,
so she heads off to dinner, and she encounters Brent, who she's done the one date with, and kind of teases him about going off to dinner.
Yeah, their dynamic is interesting.
Their dynamic is weird, and they intentionally seem to kind of prod each other in not always the nicest ways.
Yeah, it's
weird.
Yeah, the closest thing I can come to is kind of like Mean Girl-ish, but
both directions.
In nerdy ways. I don't know.
And it's unclear how much of it's awkwardness and social awkwardness and how much of it is intentional.
Yeah.
This was intentional, and it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, she says going off to dinner, and she purposely was kind of just vague about where and with who.
Let it be implied it was the date.
Yeah, and he kind of calls her out on it. He's like, you did that on purpose. Like, he knew right up front what she was doing.
Right.
Which I thought was kind of funny, but way to call her out.
Yeah. So Faye arrives at Amanda Lynn's house, and Jimmy's not there. He got a call that maybe upset him, and he rushed out, and now Amanda Lynn is worried because he should be back by now.
Yeah.
They call around a little bit, and then they finally hear from Elliot, who has found Jimmy's car near his house.
Right. And so I thought this was interesting because they get in the car, they head that way, and Faye's like, the woods, that's not really descript in this area. Like, how are we going to find them? But when they got there, it was very evident what the locals think of as the woods. Like, Amanda Lynn knew right where to go. But I just thought that was really interesting and kind of a nice way to show how locals kind of work in a small community.
They understand things that outsiders don't always. Yeah. So they arrive, and there is a search party already going, and it's not long before they find Jimmy's body, apparently having fallen off of the cell tower right next to it. So like you said, the cell tower became kind of important.
I know. See, whoop, whoop. I knew it. I knew it.
Mention it 2 or 3 times, and we'll finally catch on that it might be important. And so they start kind of like freeing his body from the kudzu vines and stuff, and Faye asks, should we wait for the coroner for that?
Because
you should have. Yeah, they're all kind of in shock and mourning too. Yeah. And then we have both Leo, Smiley, and George are both kind of weirdly aggressive towards her.
Yeah.
But again, I just wrote it off as they're in mourning, right? They're in shock, they're in mourning for this person they knew and loved that's gone. But basically, the thrust of their aggression came down to outsiders that never brought anything good to us, which is kind of true too.
Yeah, but it was weird. It was very weird, but also I understand it. Just seemed, even for that situation, it seemed kind of aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, it fits George and Leo both too.
That's true.
Right. And then we finish off with Carmen's interview with Jimmy. So both people who have passed in this book so far.
Dun, dun,
Dun,
dun.
dun, dun. These are always very interesting. There's not always a huge amount plot-wise. There's more character development, I'd say, generally. A couple points that stood out to me was Jimmy's very interested in astronomy. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything more important in there.
I did note that Jimmy was kind of he admired Brent for the fact that, like, he got out, made a decent living, and that's kind of the path he wants to follow too. Again, I thought that was a little foreshadowy.
Yeah, yeah. Look at the hopes and dreams of this. Looking back, there's a few characters like this, but Jimmy was very much like, when too much good potential is going to happen in the story, sometimes you have to worry about that character.
Right. Yeah.
Like I'm still at this point a little worried about Elliot because he has so many dreams and stuff. He's gonna have with his happy wife and everything. And
Yeah.
like, oh gosh, no Elliot.
Right.
So yeah, I should have maybe wondered if that was going to happen, but I think the narrative was good here because it had me thinking Jimmy was involved in the murder in some way, or maybe the culprit even possibly.
Yeah, because of
So I didn't quite see it coming then.
the little stunt he pulled with the dummy when Faye first arrived and stuff. I was like, this kid's kind of a troublemaker, but
Yeah.
everybody admires him because he's gonna get out,
Yeah, and he's could be one of those people that's very good at making people like him.
Right, and so he gets away with lots.
Right.
That was what I thought.
It still is possible what was going on, but it seems like he was genuinely pretty good too, from what we're gathering here. Chapter 17, the security team arrives because they got a silent alarm about the tower.
Yeah, the whole way that was handled just is weird to me. Like,
Yeah.
just the fact that they were like, meh, corner, no corner, that doesn't matter. And then the security team shows up like way late. Because I know it takes a while for them to get there, but if that's the best security you have for a cell tower, that's kind of worrying.
Yeah. Some of them are so remote. I suppose it seems a little believable.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sheriff investigates. They don't at this point think any sign of foul play. Either drunken kids is floated, suicide is rejected.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
It's more of a question of almost like why he was at the tower rather than how he died. They just kind of think that he was climbing up and maybe fell or misstepped or something.
Yep. At the site, Faye knows that, no one's going to be in the mood for doing serious good work today. And she just has them do some more of that backfilling from Raleigh, which is interesting because he's told her she only has like 3 days that she's like, we'll just backfill today.
Which, I mean, I can see it because of what happened, but also she just seems so chill about it.
It's not explicitly said, but it feels like she's not taking the threat very seriously.
Yeah.
Which maybe she has a reason for that. I don't quite know, but.
Oh, and I think it's also important to mention going back, like the kudzu around the cell tower was really thick and they couldn't initially find his cell phone.
So Adam shows up at about lunchtime. She sends the crew off to lunch and they start talking about Jimmy and everything. He's already heard about Jimmy and the encounter Faye had with Leo and George.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of like this quote, "Woman, don't you have enough sense to get scared now and then?" Because he's kind of reprimanding her for like constantly being in these situations when like he's told her at least once, hey, if you think this has been a murder, you should be around people you trust.
Right. Yeah. But Faye be Fayin'.
Faye be Fayin', as you say. That needs to be a saying. So he again tries to, hey, stop being an idiot. Stick with people.
Yeah.
Guess what she does?
The exact opposite.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah. Except occasionally when she remembers to, it seems like. Every once in a while she'll remember, I should take Joe with me or something, right?
I'm almost starting to feel like kind of bad for Joe in this book because I feel like she kind of takes advantage of him or doesn't necessarily fully appreciate him. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm starting to like feel weird about their dynamic. And I can't really explain why.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Faye observes that Jimmy's boots match the boots that were found after the fire.
Yeah.
Adam says it's confirmed, but it doesn't mean that he was the culprit. It just means he was
creeping around.
He was there at some point. It doesn't even mean he was there during the incident.
Yep.
They talk about the phone and the phone call he got. Joe provides some observations. He has been able to figure out the sound of everybody's vehicle as they hit a particular pothole.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting.
He's observed that George A, with his moving van, leaves with it full in the mornings and comes back with it less full in the evenings.
Yeah.
And why would he be doing that if he's moving stuff for people?
Right. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't it be like
empty both ways?
Right.
Or at least most of the time it should be.
Right.
Which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one we've observed before. Adam observes that archaeology and criminal investigation overlaps.
I know. I love that Mariana Evans kind of tied that in this book.
Drawing that line very directly this time. Yeah. I mean, it was there last time too, I'd say, but
Yeah, but it's just very direct, and I like that she kinda created a character in Adam to kinda, like, emphasize that.
Yep.
So
Yep. And so they're talking, and Faye sees Brent going into a house or something. She observes that his blonde hair has dark roots with a discolored streak in it, which is a telltale sign of Sujosa heritage. And she's ticked.
Yeah, she feels, I would say, betrayed.
Yeah, like, it's kinda like, well, how would you bring that up? And then as she points out, like, she had that whole incident after the football game feeling, like, weird she was the only one in the area who wasn't white. That would've been an opportunity for him to tell her, right?
Yeah.
That's a very fair
Yeah.
fair cop there.
So she's mad. She's big mad.
Big mad. And then basically Adam just straight up tells Faye that he's interested.
Yeah, this is
Which is interesting because it never even came up that he was, like, available, right?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
I'd assumed so far, like, he had a wife or something or whatever,
Mhm.
but it doesn't go really great for him because she's ticked.
Yeah,
But
I feel like timing was not great on that one.
yeah, but we get a little bit of his thoughts after they separate, and he's got it bad.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that whole situation, like, almost made it worse. Like, he was like, "Oh," like, he liked her, like, spice or whatever, you
Oh,
know?
yeah, yeah. Well, he resisted saying you're cute when you're angry or something.
Yes,
Right,
which
but he
good
thought
move.
it.
Good move, buddy. Good move.
Yeah, good move. He also observes that she said when all of this was over, she expected him to ask her out, but she didn't say she was going to say yes.
Right, yes.
Which is fantastic. So, drama.
Love it.
On that note, if you know someone with a commute who enjoys murder mysteries and a smattering of relationship drama, send them the first episode in this book. You'll find a link in the description. All right, chapter 18. Where are we going? 22. So here we start off hearing about how Faye is a tough archaeologist lady. She is.
Yep.
But she hates paperwork, which,
Typical.
yeah, she would. And then she starts thinking about Jimmy's cell phone, and she realizes that if anyone can find it, it'd probably be Joe. So she goes and finds Adam, and they go off and do a survey, basically trying to find that cell phone.
Which I thought was really funny. Just, I felt like Joe was getting a little frustrated with them.
We get some of his thoughts a little later that I like.
Yeah, yeah. But they go out there, try to find it. They don't find the cell phone.
And then we end this chapter with an interview with Irene Montrose. And this is mostly character stuff, like Dwayne used to be much more involved in the family, but when he learned about his wife's hepatitis and how she got it, kind of like he disconnected from everything.
I think and I think one of the more important parts of this interview is the name Carmo, which I guess is Irene's middle name, and it's a family name that has been passed down from a long time. So Carmen, of course, is wondering about the origin of that name and if that could kind of somehow tie back to the history of the Sujosa.
Yep. It's also very clear that Irene wants to get away from the town. Very, very clear about that. So, short little chapter. So, Dr. Emery finds Faye and excitedly tells her that he's traced the source of the songs. The song she sent him to 2 songs. And this gets very like, this is this, that is that.
Yeah, yeah.
But the gist of it is there's some little clues in the language and the wording of the songs that connect it they think, pretty solidly to songs that have a pretty specific and narrow date for when they were popular.
Right, yeah.
Did you find this like a smoking gun convincing kind of a thing?
I found it interesting, but I didn't like, you need more evidence.
Yeah,
I don't think it was the smoking gun that, like, it's interesting and it's cool, but like, to me, it's a clue.
Yeah.
That could lead to a smoking gun.
It is evidence. With other evidence, you have strong, this is a thing we've talked about before. You don't just go for one thing typically, even if you have like carbon-14 dating. You don't just go with the carbon-14 dating. You look at all the clues, they all add up, and then you have really strong evidence for a certain thing. So this is evidence, and it's kind of exciting, and it's kind of fun how they tie it all together, but I'm not necessarily convinced convinced at this point.
Yeah, I think you need, like, it's an oral tradition. It's very interesting. It's very cool. It definitely holds maybe a lot of weight, but you need more.
And then they talk about the name Carmo, and he asks her about it. Like, why would you ask an archaeologist? This is your job.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
But whatever. Faye and Laurel are heading back to the bunkhouse, and Laurel just straight up asks Faye what her relationship with Joe is, because I could see as an outsider it being pretty unclear.
Yeah. I know, I was like, "Ooh, let's see how this goes." Because I feel like, sometimes people they're really, really close and people perceive them as potentially a couple, but they perceive each other as friends, but it's like,
But are you really?
but are you really?
Yeah.
Are you friends just because nobody else has pursued that person? But once they pursued that person, you're gonna feel a little hint of jealousy and stuff, and that's kind of what I was wondering if Faye was experiencing.
And I'll give Faye credit. I don't see any indication that she is experiencing that.
No.
Like, she doesn't want to be around them when they're being all lovey-dovey, and like, that's probably fair.
Yeah,
Right.
nobody wants that.
Right.
Ew.
Right. Ew. Ick. So she basically in the bunkhouse, they're doing the lovey-dovey thing. Like, I don't remember. So other people are around. She doesn't want to be around them. So he's like, she wants to get away. So she heads out to her office. And I had my notes here alone
Yes.
in the evening.
Yeah.
And then we get quite a dramatic bomb of an interview with Brent Harbison from Carmen. We heard early on he had some complaints about Carmen and her way she approached things.
Yeah.
We didn't know that he straight up told her these things to her face in an interview.
And
on the
not in a
record.
nice way
No.
either.
No, he straight up calls her, didn't you have a phrase you like?
Yeah, he straight up calls her a parasite, which is pretty harsh.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think in previous episodes, I think it was maybe her inexperience that makes her come off like that. I don't think it was necessarily ill intent.
My impression was he's upset because not ill intent, but she's coming at it like, look at how these poor people are doing so well despite their circumstances.
Right.
Instead of celebrating them for who they are.
Right.
I think that is more what he's complaining about here.
Well, and he also brings into it things that she's not necessarily aware of, like funding that was supposed to happen for, or even if she is aware of it, she doesn't really have control over it, but like funding for different programs to help the Sujosa,
His argument is that her tone is hurting efforts to make that a better situation.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I'm talking about like how like funding was cut for like George's like roofing business, and they
Right.
brought in outsider contractors, and he's like, this program just is, this whole project is not what it's meant to be, and you're part of the problem, essentially.
Yeah, and I think what she is doing is actively being used as a tool to
Right.
be part of the problem.
Yeah.
Even if she isn't intending that purpose.
Yeah. So it's the way she's interacting with people versus her being part of this larger project that is he perceives as hurting the Sujosa and not meeting its promises.
Chapter 20. It's meeting time on a Thursday. Last minute notification.
Yes, like Dr. O'Reilly like changed the meeting time last minute. Rude.
No one's excited about Faye's potsherd, which, yeah. Even she knows is like it's kind of weak.
Yeah.
But she does a little presentation with Dr. Emery about the song, and Raleigh kind of throws cold water on it, which, as we talked about, like, yeah, this is cool, guys, but this is all we have right now. It's not enough.
Yeah, like we need something substantial at this point.
Right.
Which I don't like Dr. Raleigh, but I agree.
And then he goes after Faye because she failed to turn in Carmen's notes to him.
Yeah.
He thought they were all lost.
Right.
Which, yeah, that was an oversight. We know it wasn't intentional.
Right.
But that is a mistake on her part. And, she fesses up to it. For someone who's apparently been kind of aggressive to her and to women on the crew in general, it's not a good thing to have to, like, admit fault here.
Right. Like, oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Joe does Joe. He stands up and Raleigh just, like, looks at him like, what the heck are you doing? And Joe takes it as permission. And says, we should all do a moment of silence for the people that we've lost.
Right.
Which, at the same time, diffuses the immediate situation and increases the tension because Raleigh should have been the one that did this.
Right.
So
it was amazing.
It was amazing. It was very good.
Oh, and this is also where we find out that Carmo is Portuguese.
Yes, this is after a phone call to Magda, the professor, for basically emotional support, I think.
Magda, can you imagine when I was reading that? I was like, Magda must be like, oh my gosh, what is happening over there? Yeah, like that's crazy. So linguistically, between George's name, Carmo, a couple other things, they have pretty much set on that there's some Portuguese ancestry somehow within the Sujosa community. And they figure out that they may have been descended from African Moors because the Moors went into Portugal. And so there's possibly Moorish ancestry, African ancestry, Portuguese ancestry. So they're kind of tying in how all these different
elements.
how these different elements kind of tie together, which was really interesting. And I like the way Mariana Evans tied this all together. I get that they're getting this from this song and a couple other things. And I like the way that like oral history is being tied into this.
Yeah, so after that conversation, Faye gets to bed but can't sleep, think about archaeology and murder, as you probably would, and she realizes that certain Sujosa are inexplicably a little better off than other ones.
Yeah.
Thinks of the Rania and Leo Smiley's satellite dish, George's new van, Fred's motorcycle, and then Jimmy has expensive cell phones and a telescope, apparently.
Yeah.
These are all luxury things that are a little off kilter from where everyone else is at.
Which at the time, I was like, I didn't know where this was going. I was like, okay, what's the angle, Faye?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure either. Chapter 21, Faye meets with Adam in a diner, and they talk about the case and a few things, but honestly, there's not much that isn't going to be revealed in other ways.
Yeah.
So I think we'll skip this one. It's a very short chapter.
But she does, yeah, I think it just kind of summarizes things and it sets the stage for the upcoming chapter.
Yep. Next chapter, Faye's looking for Joe but can't find him or Laurel at the bunkhouse, and I summarize it as she assumes they're getting acquainted. So she's like, all right, I'm not going to look for them anymore. She sends Elliot to go and do some more work on the Lester site, and then she figures out that she needs to go talk to Rania and goes to talk to Rania at her house alone.
Yeah, Faye's Faying.
Yep. And she goes and grabs that piece of ceramic, which she's identified as lusterware, which is often tied to Islamic traditions, which all fits as well, and very, very sought after, but no idea why it would be here of all places.
Right. Like, why was it something that old and kind of valuable just tossed in a vacant lot, essentially?
Right.
It's a little sus.
And then Joe turns out he's actually back at the tower looking for that cell phone.
And thankful to be alone.
Yeah, because like I liked how he kind of thought it's his internal monologue we're hearing, but basically like they're very smart and intelligent people and they were just in the way.
Yep.
Yeah. 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 Then Faye shows up at Rania's house, and damn it, Faye, I thought she was at least going to like meet her at the grocery store or something, or at the site behind the grocery store. I didn't know she's going to go to the person's house.
Yeah.
Who she's going to potentially accuse of crimes, including murder.
But yeah, go to her house.
Go to her house alone.
Yeah. Smart move. Adam would be proud.
Oh my gosh. Turns out, okay, I'll let you all know right now.
But it's tense.
It is. You don't know what's going to happen there, and there's been a lot of work establishing how strong Rania is.
Right. Yeah. Like
and a very intense personality.
Yeah.
Like I could see her being the kind of person where she decides you need to go, then she's going to make you gone, right?
Yep.
What we ultimately find is that she has been making fake replicas.
Committing forgery, essentially.
Yeah. Of lusterware pots or ceramics. One in particular that apparently there's only like 8 of in the world.
Yeah.
And like it goes for a lot of money. And then basically they've done one already and said, look, we found another one.
Right. Which is so strange. But I guess with their ancestry and stuff, they're kind of banking on that, I guess.
Nobody knows that at this point, though.
Yeah.
But that'll actually be explained a little bit later.
Right.
They're coming through another person, and that person is basically in a position where they can say, look what we've discovered. But they're going to do another one, which seems like that's pushing it.
I know, I was like, really, guys, like maybe it's time to like
Cut and
switch
run.
tactics a little bit.
Or maybe you just need to wait like 10 years before you do another one. But ultimately, she has a bunch of people on her payroll with this.
Yeah, it's the whole thing.
Leo, Jimmy, George, and Irene.
Irene, yes.
I think are all people on her payroll. Which at that point I was like, oh, George destroying the sherd.
Makes sense.
It wasn't just pettiness. He was intentionally like trying to remove evidence.
Yep.
I mean, it's still probably petty, but
Yeah, it's a little both. But a lot of the interpersonal relationships kind of start to make sense here. Like Rania not, because remember when Rania was first kind of being weird with Faye and we were like, what's going on there? And we thought, oh, maybe just an intense personality or something, but it's all kind of coming together.
What happened was one of the replicas broke and Georgie was supposed to dispose of it at the dump and just toss it out back of the grocery store. So they were doing everything they could to remove all the evidence they could find. When apparently Rania got hired, she left with a pocket full of the things.
Yeah, when she was doing the backfill and stuff, she was just like pocketing all the ones she found, which I thought was pretty funny.
And also the two guys that got fired from the site were also doing the same thing as they were going. We find out that Jimmy's prank was actually intended for her, although he did not intend for her to like almost go off a cliff.
Right. I know, I was like going back and forth with this and I was like, oh my gosh, this stupid prank.
And this is what Rania was chewing him out about at the football game that we saw. So that was him getting an earful.
Yeah, this chapter pretty much like ties all this weird stuff that's been going on.
Answers an awful lot, doesn't it? And then everyone has good alibis for the murder, basically.
Right, yeah. So we still don't know who murdered Carmen.
Right. Actually, Jimmy didn't have a good alibi, but nobody can possibly believe he would have been the murderer.
Right, yeah.
But they think, well, if he wasn't, then maybe they saw something. And then that's why he died eventually.
Right. It wouldn't make sense for the murderer to also be murdered because then there's another murderer.
Unless it was more than one murderer.
Right,
in the first place. But Faye goes to call Adam to tell him what's happened, what she's found in Rania's house, which again, I was still like,
I know. Oh my God.
You should be like, yeah, I definitely won't tell anybody and skedoot and then.
Right.
Yeah. But Adam is not in range, so she can't reach him right now.
And she does feel bad because she understands like Rania's intentions as far as like, even though it was bad, she was doing it for her family and stuff. And she's come to like be friends with Rania and everything. So it's complicated feelings.
And the book deals with this too, but I'll say it because I was having these thoughts at the time. If you're going to victimize anybody with a con, the people with the money to buy things like this,
I know. And I was like, and I think even at some point, like Faye's like, she kind of says like, yeah, I don't really have a lot of empathy for the people with tons of money that can buy forgeries, especially if they're not going to like bother to authenticate them. Like, screw them.
Yeah. And if you want more understanding about why we feel this way, check out Stealing History and to some degree Finders Keepers, I'd say.
Yeah.
A little less so that one, but you still hear plenty about our opinions on that kind of a thing.
Right.
So, yeah, so we're not too sympathetic.
Like, oh no, the rich people have been victimized.
And it went to these people who they've talked about a lot. They've never gotten anything from outsiders. Like nothing ever good has come from it. So so I'm, even though yes, it's illegal, I'm kind of on Rania's side here. Also, I like Rania. That helps.
I do like too how like she was like, "Is Miss Dovey in on this?" And they were like, "Absolutely not."
Yeah.
I think Miss Dovey would have probably put a stop to it.
23. Yeah, this starts off with Rania feeling bad for fooling people. Faye doesn't feel bad.
Yeah.
And I have in here kind of neither do I.
Yeah, samesies.
This is actually, I jumped ahead in the murder mystery a little bit here and figured something out that I'm proud of. Because they're talking about who knew they've been talking to Carmen, what was the secret, right, and everything. And I thought, who was going out of their way to disrupt Carmen's effort to talk to certain people, investigate certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And this was when I realized that Raleigh was 100% at least involved in the frauds.
Yeah.
Which again, look at some of the books we just mentioned, is very believable.
Yeah.
A lot of high-level people have been involved in this stuff at various times. So they're in Miss Dovey's bedroom, and she's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to find out what's going on here. You know, she is the matron.
Yes.
Like 100%. And even like Rania is kind of cowed by her, which is funny.
I feel like Miss Dovey means business.
Yeah. So they're looking at actual, they call it relics. There's some title drop. Hey.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, they are from Spain, and there's a whole bunch of, some complete, mostly are in fragments.
Yeah.
But they are 100% like from Spain ceramics. apparently there were at least fragments of one of these pots as well, these rare pots.
Yes, yeah.
She had to like save some from Leo essentially and hide them at Miss Dovey's house.
Right.
Because the buyer wanted some of the fragments so they could grind them down and put them into the fakes to fool testing, which is a thing. I haven't looked into this, but Faye in the book says a thing that's been done. I have faith that Mariana did her research on that.
I feel like that's totally plausible,
Very
honestly.
plausible. And like put it in the base because the base is the part that's not going to have the glaze on it. That's probably where they're going to do the testing.
Mm-hmm.
So someone knows what they're doing.
Right. So they didn't want like everything, every one of the last pieces of essentially their ancestry and their heritage to get ground down and put into fakes. So they hid them at Miss Dovey's to keep them from Leo.
Because even Leo is not going to cross Miss Dovey.
Right. But there's a lot of talk about the clay.
Mm-hmm. It all kind of fits together and the colors that are available.
And like there was at the beginning, it was some speculation that they were called the sujosa, meaning that I guess comes from the word dirty in Portuguese. And there was speculation that, it was somebody else calling them dirty. But it turns out like, no, look at what we can make from dirt.
They were potters.
Yes, they were potters. So it wasn't this horrible racist slur.
And Ronnie has done quite a bit of research on her own and has figured a lot of this out too, to her credit. Adam calls Miss Dovey and has lab tests on the pillow, which has basically a chemical that would have like asphyxiated her and knocked her out.
Yeah, it would have knocked her out so she wouldn't escape from the fire. Which remember, I remember reading and I was like, interesting. That's something that's used for anesthesia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love the foreshadowing.
At this point, Faye is convinced it was murder, but I was still like, I still could totally believe someone wanted her, knocked out so they could grab the notes and it was an accident and then they had to panic and try and cover it up. So I'm still not really to jump to that, but I did note that Faye did not tell Adam what she had learned, which at this point I was kind of like, WTF, Faye.
Yeah.
So
it's like
you still could be in danger.
Yeah, like goodness.
Like, so Ron is fine, but Leo and George, like George has literally threatened your life.
Yeah. Well, like we saw what happened in the last book where she was literally crawling around the roof of her house during a hurricane trying not to get murdered. It's like, Faye, have we not learned this darn thing?
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, well.
So frustrating.
Makes for good narrative.
Yes.
And it is Faye be Fayin'. Right?
Yeah, Faye be Fayin'.
Starting off with 24, briefly back with Joe, he found the phone and it survived the fall. And then we jump to Leo Smiley, who it talks a lot about how he's had to like internally justify the con and how that changes from day to day. And again, I was kind of like, yeah, you're fine, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as like, while it's horrible and they're grinding up like pieces of their heritage, that's kind of sad. Obviously, we do not condone this in any way, but as far as victims, this is a victim set that I don't have a ton of empathy for. I don't even want to call them victims because really they're taking advantage of people like the Sujosa, which we see. That's what happens, right?
Again, this is stealing history all over again in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So Leo is at George's house and he finds a metal briefcase that has been burned.
Mm-hmm.
And to his credit, he's not like, oh, we need to bury this better or anything. He's like, goes to George and like, what
have
did
you done?
You do?
Yeah.
And George says he didn't kill Carmen,
right?
But he did go into the house after the fire to retrieve it because he knew she had some lusterware sherds in there.
Yeah.
And Rania shows up and tells them that Faye has figured everything out. Leo basically says there's only one thing to do: start your truck. And then we leave from there with
Yeah.
Cut to Faye back in her office, and she goes to ask Emery and Bingham if they know what Carmen was doing before the fire. And it turns out Bingham, I think it was, yes, had the deed that she was referencing.
Right. So this is where we learn about, we remember like there was that weird dispute over who owned what land, where the property boundaries were. Faye's been trying to figure this out because she wants to, or she thought it was on.
She thought Amanda Lynn might own some of Leo's land, which would be places that she could dig them.
Right, yeah.
Yes. And she notes the signature, which is Sam Leicester.
Lester.
And that's a little conversation they have, right?
So Leicester, the British like to add a lot of letters into stuff. And I went to the University of Leicester, so I'm allowed to criticize. But in this book, Leicester has thus far been Lester, how we would say Lester, the one that makes
American.
sense.
Yeah.
But in England, there's a place called Leicester, and it's spelled Leicester. Yeah, I know.
And that is the signature.
That is the signature. And so it dawns on Faye, like, oh my gosh, people change the way they spell their names. And then, yeah, I love this because, yeah, Leicester. I was like, woo, yay, Leicester. Oh, yeah. And she notes, like, in the map in the deed, or no, the description, it talks about Leicester's Creek. And I guess that there's a bunch of landmarks, but creeks over time, like any flowing water body, can change their path. And so that becomes significant as well, because that could change the boundaries of the property as they were written in this deed. But
yeah, I did note that the description of the property was kind of like a treasure map. Like, from here, you go 20 paces to this. And then it's like, that sounds like a nightmare for...
Well, and I'm just impressed that she can read them, because anytime I've tried to look at old deeds, they're written in that very scrolly old style cursive, and they use the F that looks like, or the is it the S that looks like an F, or the F that looks like an S, whichever. And it's so hard to read. And most of the time I'm like, okay, we're just gonna go with what like the property appraiser says.
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, good job, Faye.
Yeah.
Because I'll even like, when you look at the digitized and you're like, you scroll in, you zoom in as far as you can, and you're like, yeah, I still don't know what that
I have
says.
no idea. Yeah. So back with Joe, he has found Adam and turned in the phone, and now he's looking for Faye because he wants to tell her he found it. And he comes across Laurel, who has his test results.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
And this is, again, she's good.
She is.
She pulls out the papers of the test results, sees his body language and how uncomfortable he is, and she just puts them in a drawer and says, this is what they tell me.
Yep.
And essentially it comes down to, they phrase it like he's a very smart man, but his brain is wired a little differently from other people's.
Yeah.
And then she knows some techniques that can help him out, which she's already helped him a little bit.
Right.
So. And then Joe asks her out, and she says yes, and then Joe discovers that she has good breath.
Yeah.
Which I liked. Chapter 25, last chapter for today. It starts off at the most exciting place that you can possibly end a podcast, the Public Records Office.
Woo! Which that used to be when I was doing cultural resource management, doing like the background research stuff, going to the local property appraiser's office and stuff. That was some of my favorite stuff to do.
It's also air conditioned usually.
Okay, yeah, there's that. But it was a good, like, when it was raining out, that was like where we would kind of go to in lieu of doing field work, and it was some of my favorites.
Yeah, and
good times.
Historic research is kind of fun.
Yes.
It is a lot of tedium, like any job, but it is rewarding too.
But I do like, because I related so heavily to the fact that she was like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, nope, I need to stay on track. There were all these little offshoots, these little side quests she could go on, but she's like, no, must stay on track.
That's easy to do, yes.
Yep.
So she finds 2 other copies of the will. Essentially, the idea being multiple copies would have been made by hand. And she sees that they are generally very close, but there's some discrepancies, particularly on the second page.
Right.
And particularly in the way the boundary is described. And essentially, it comes down to the current boundary is wrong.
Yeah. And this, because both Amanda Lynn and Dwayne thought that the property line ran, I guess, between the homestead and the mound, but there was also a mill and some other stuff.
I think they thought the mound, homestead, and cemetery were all on Dwayne's side.
Yes.
And it turns out Amanda Lynn owns all of that.
Right. So, in essence, Amanda Lynn has already said, yeah, you can dig on my property.
And Faye's like, yes, score.
Yeah, but we knew it wasn't going to be that easy.
Never
Come
that
on.
easy, right? Faye returns to her office to find Adam has let himself in. They have a little conversation about the lock. He's got a cell phone text that apparently came from Irene right before Jimmy died, essentially saying she wanted to break up and meet at the tower.
Yeah.
So now it's looking like foul play.
Okay. So in the text that Irene supposedly sent to Jimmy, it said, I can't go on like this. Meet me at the tower to say goodbye. And it was signed Irene.
What kid does that?
My dad does that sometimes.
But remember, this is in 2007? I still don't think you would, but
I don't know.
That's the best I got.
But I was just like, this screams older person.
Well, I don't think that they have any real thought that it was Irene. They think that was a ruse.
Mm-hmm.
Faye goes to talk to Irene. Adam goes to talk to Georgie. Faye still doesn't tell him everything she learned, which, again, it just felt weird that she's, you could still be in danger here, Faye. She talks with Irene a bit at her house, and they talk about the devil stunt a little bit. Irene says he felt really bad. And then she asks about the fire. He's done something a little off the cuff. Could he have done something else? And Irene is like very much
nope,
no.
Absolutely not. Right.
But she says he wouldn't have, but he also wouldn't talk to her about it. And he says something along the lines of, it'll just make you more unhappy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which she took to mean just the topic in general. But this is a murder mystery.
Right.
And then finally, Faye goes to talk to Kiki about the property to let Dwayne know, I think, kind of, that she's going to be digging, and ask Kiki to let him know. And then also, interesting, Brent shows up wanting to treat Kiki for her condition, and she refuses.
Right.
And he says she's found some crackpot stuff.
On the
Basically, she spent her money on that instead of actual treatment. And that she had been in remission.
Yeah.
And I didn't write down exactly what this was, but Faye lands a dig on Brent at this point that felt a little bit like she was kicking him when he was down right at the end there. I get that she's mad, and I'm not saying she's not right to be mad, but there's also just petty. And this kind of came off as petty.
Oh, okay. So he was upset because he thought Kiki was in remission and getting better. And then she kind of started to slip away. And now she's doing all this pseudo medicine stuff. And he's like, I'm just hoping she'll let me in and let me help her before it's too late. And so Faye's like, would that make you feel better about yourself? Money didn't do it. A big house didn't do it. Maybe, taking care of Kiki and curing her will finally make you feel better about yourself and
about who you are.
Yeah, you're the big man who, and it was a low blow.
Yeah, especially because he's legit worried about her.
Yeah.
And she's of course referencing the fact that he disguises his Sujosa and his
right. Yeah.
So we end on a low blow for this episode.
I know. Boo.
Yeah.
So at this point, Dwayne doesn't know that he doesn't own the land he thinks he owns, right? How do you think he's going to take that?
I think if this was earlier in the book, he would probably get out of his armchair and show up with a rifle at the site. And they'd have to call in the sheriff and there'd be this big dispute. I don't think we've got time for that though. So I'm not sure quite how that's going to play out.
Yeah, we're at the end of the book pretty much here. Yeah, I think he's going to be upset. And I think it could become almost like a pity party. I could see him doing the pity party bit. I don't know. Just being, because he what is he gonna do? Stick his dogs on a mandolin? You know what I'm saying? So I think he's just gonna throw a pity party and be like, I don't know, go get drunk or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Who knows? But we'll finish up and find out next time. So we'll see you then.
Happy reading, everybody.